Calculated. My father used the word while my signature hung behind him. A clerk's copy of the ledger page had been pinned to a board, every figure large enough for the table to read. Beneath my name were payments meant for widows of men killed in the Vale mine. Payments that had never reached them. Mrs. Mercer sat 3 chairs away in black. Her husband had died beneath our land. Beside her untouched plate lay a rent notice folded into a square. My sisters would not look at me. The banker did. So did the estate solicitor and the Marquess of Blackmere, the man my father expected one of us to marry. Father rested one hand on Lydia's shoulder. "My youngest daughter has always resented her sisters," he said. "When she learned his lordship intended to join our families, she manufactured a crisis and made herself appear to be our rescuer." A murmur moved around the table. Not disbelief. Recognition. He had offered them the version of me they expected, the quiet daughter who watched too closely, spoke too little, and must be hiding something. Across from me, Elias watched my father. Beside my plate sat my mother's copper tea caddy. Inside it was a key. Elias knew what it opened. "Tell them," he said. Father's expression tightened. "Yes, Beatrice. Tell them why your signature appears beside the missing money." The old answer rose automatically. "I am sorry." Mrs. Mercer leaned toward me. "Did you take it?" Her voice broke. "I could save myself by naming my father. I could protect him by accepting the blame. Either choice was one he had prepared for, so I chose neither. I stood. "I altered one figure in that ledger," I said. Father smiled. "But I did not take the money." His smile arrived a second too late. I lifted the copper tea caddy. "The number I changed is the only reason we can prove where the money truly went." End quote. No one moved. Then my father looked at the caddy. And Elias saw the instant my father realized I had not come to confess. 2 days earlier, the same caddy had been locked inside the morning room cabinet, and I had believed its only secret was the smell of bergamot trapped in the copper. Rain pressed against the windows of Vale House. Water slipped through cracked stone above the east corridor and fell into a basin I had placed beneath it before dawn. My father stood before the fire, reading the same letter again. "The Marquess of Blackmere will arrive before luncheon," he said. Lydia lowered a fashion plate. Cecily stopped trimming a loose thread from her sleeve. Their new gowns had arrived the previous evening. Mine had not. Father folded the letter and held it over the flame until the seal curled black. "He requires a wife before autumn," Lydia said. "Everyone knows too much," Father replied. His gaze moved to me. "Beatrice, the silver service is tarnished." It was not. I had polished it after midnight. Still, I crossed to the cabinet. In our house, the truth of a command mattered less than the speed of obedience. My mother's tea caddy sat behind the porcelain cups, a swallow engraved into its lid. I reached for the silver pot. Father's hand closed around my wrist. "Not that blend. Blackmere serves Ceylon." "I know." His fingers tightened, then released me. "You will pour. You are less likely to fill the room with chatter." Lydia laughed. Cecily did not. A carriage sounded before noon, but Elias Thorne entered without waiting to be announced. Rain darkened his coat. Mud marked one boot more heavily than the other, and his left hand remained gloved after the right had been uncovered. He greeted my father, then my sisters. When Father gestured toward me, his introduction barely reached my name. "My youngest, Beatrice. She keeps herself occupied." Elias glanced at the basin beneath the leaking ceiling. "Does she?" I poured the tea. Lydia described the London season. Cecily asked about Blackmere Abbey. My father steered every answer toward marriage, land, and the advantages of joining 2 old families. Elias drank once. "Who manages the Vale tenant accounts?" "My steward," Father said. The drip in the corridor continued. Elias turned to me. "How many roofs are waiting for slate?" Father's thumb stopped against his signet ring. I should have claimed ignorance. 7, I answered. 3, before the next heavy rain. Lydia's spoon struck her saucer. "And the mine relief fund?" Elias asked. "His lordship did not come to discuss drainage and widows," Father said. Elias did not raise his voice. "I decide what I came to discuss." My father remained beside the fire, but he no longer appeared to own the space between us. Elias looked at my sisters, then at me behind the tea table. "I was told Lord Vale had 3 accomplished daughters, yet only one knows which families may lose their homes before winter." Father stepped forward. Beatrice reads figures. It gives her an inflated sense of importance. Elias's gaze dropped to the caddy beneath my hand. No, I think it gives someone else reason to keep her standing. The rain struck harder against the glass. Elias pushed his second cup toward the empty chair beside him. Sit down, Miss Vale. Father's face went still. I had never been invited to that table while guests were present. I am serving, I said. That was not my question. I set the silver pot beside the copper caddy and sat. Elias leaned back, studying us with the patience of a man who had found the crack he came to test. I did not travel here to choose the prettiest daughter, he said. I came to discover which one of you has been keeping this estate alive. Elias's invitation did not make the chair feel like mine. The carved back pressed between my shoulder blades, while Lydia sat rigid across from me. Cecily kept smoothing the same crease in her skirt. Father had returned to the hearth, but the fire no longer belonged to him. Every time a log shifted, his signet ring struck the mantel. Elias asked about the northern cottages. I answered because no one else could. The roofs above the Mercer row had lost slate in the spring storms. The Harrow family shared one working chimney between two rooms. A drainage ditch near the mine sent black water across a kitchen garden whenever it rained. Father interrupted twice. Elias ignored him twice. When the questions ended, he rose and buttoned his coat. I would like to see the cottages. Father gave a short laugh. In this weather, the damage is unlikely to improve for my convenience. I will have the steward prepare a report. I asked to see them. His attention moved to me. Miss Vale can show me. Father stepped away from the fire. Beatrice has household duties. So does every competent woman I have ever met. They rarely prevent her from walking. I stood before Father could refuse again. The old apology already waited behind my teeth. I am sorry. I should have. Elias held out my cloak. He did not touch me. He only waited until I took it. For knowing the condition of your own estate? He asked. The unfinished apology died in my throat. Outside, the rain had thinned, and coal smoke lay low over the tenant road. Gravel shifted beneath our boots. Elias used a walking stick on the slope, carrying it as if it offended him. His left step shortened whenever the ground turned uneven. We both pretended I had not noticed. You did not want to sit at that table, Elias said. I was not expected to. That was not what I said. A wet branch caught my sleeve. I freed the wool from its thorns. Wanting a place does not make it yours. No, he said. But surrendering it before anyone refuses you makes theft remarkably easy. The road descended toward the mine. Gray cottages stood in two uneven rows. A woman was stretching patched linen beneath an overhang when she saw us. She lowered her head to Elias. Then she recognized me. Mrs. Mercer's hands stopped. She had worn brighter colors before the collapse. I remembered a yellow shawl at the harvest service and her husband laughing because their youngest son had fallen asleep inside the grain cart. Now everything she wore was black or brown. Your Grace, she said to Elias. He inclined his head. Mrs. Mercer. Her eyes narrowed. You know my name? I read the casualty list. I stepped forward. We came to inspect the roof. We reported the roof in May. I know. And in June. I know. Rain dropped between us from the overhang. Mrs. Mercer looked at my offered hand. She did not take it. My payment stopped after the funeral allowance, she said. Your name was on the letter. Elias's walking stick settled into the mud. What letter? Mrs. Mercer returned from the cottage with a folded sheet. The Vale seal had been pressed crookedly into the wax. She gave it to Elias, not me. The letter stated that the mine relief fund had been reduced after an accounting review. It instructed Mrs. Mercer to apply for parish assistance and bore my signature beneath the final paragraph. The signature was mine. The words were not. I did not write this, I said. But you signed it. I had signed a stack of estate notices during the week after the collapse. Father had placed black ribbons around the inkwell and told me the families needed prompt decisions more than ceremony. I had not read every page. That truth felt too small to offer a widow. I am sorry, I said. There it was again. The answer that arrived whenever pain entered a room, whether I had caused it or not. Mrs. Mercer took the letter from Elias. Sorry does not buy coal. She closed the door. I walked toward the end of the row before Elias could speak. Behind the cottages, the mine yard spread beneath a low sky. Rainwater gathered in the wheel tracks, blackened by coal dust. My mother had created the relief fund after an earlier tunnel accident took 3 men. She sold a pearl necklace to establish it and made father promise that every family would receive money without begging. For years, she kept the accounts herself. After she died, the ledger came to me. I was 19 when father placed his hand over an entry and told me the total was wrong. He dictated a different figure. I copied it. The alteration moved money out of the widow's column and into a maintenance account controlled by the estate. Father said the transfer would last only until the autumn rents arrived. Refusing, he warned, would close the mine and leave every family with nothing. I believed him because fear can sound like responsibility when spoken by a parent. Months later, I restored the original figure in my private notes. The official ledger remained untouched, but the difference between the two figures matched the first sum moved into the maintenance account. Elias stopped beside me at the fence. "You recognize the signature." "It is mine." "Not the question." I signed papers without reading them. "Why?" "My father said delay would hurt the families." "And you accepted that?" "Yes." The word scraped on the way out. Elias rested both hands on his walking stick. "You are not innocent of carelessness." "No, but carelessness is not theft." I watched men cross the yard with coal ground into the seams of their faces. "You cannot know that." "I know the letter was prepared to make your signature carry a decision you did not write. I know your father tried to keep you from coming here." And Mrs. Mercer's anger did not surprise him when I mentioned the fund. I turned toward him. "You watched him?" "I watch everyone who answers a question that was not asked." The mist had darkened his hair at the temples. He looked tired rather than triumphant. That made his attention harder to dismiss. "I should return," I said. "To apologize?" The question landed too accurately. My fingers tightened around my cloak. "You have known my family for less than an afternoon." "Yes. You cannot understand what keeps a house standing." "No. But I understand what happens when one person is ordered to hold up every wall and then blamed for the cracks." A bell sounded from the mine yard. Elias stepped aside, leaving the path open rather than directing me toward it. I passed him without answering. At the top of the road, Vale House waited above the mine haze, its windows bright and watchful. For years, I had believed silence was the only dignity no one could take from me. Walking back beside Elias, I began to understand that silence had been the place my father stored everything he wanted me to carry. The copper tea caddy waited in my room when I returned from the cottages. Someone had removed it from the morning room cabinet and placed it in the center of my writing desk. The swallow on its lid faced the door. I closed the door behind me without taking off my cloak. Nothing else appeared disturbed. My comb remained beside the wash basin. The drawer containing my mother's letters was still locked. Even the ashes in the grate had settled into the same pale mound I had left that morning. Only the caddy had moved. I crossed the carpet and touched the lid. Cold metal. A faint trace of bergamot. One fresh scratch beside the hinge. My father did not enter bedrooms himself. He sent servants, sisters, or instructions folded into squares. The scratch meant someone had opened the cabinet in haste. I carried the caddy to the window. Rainlight caught along the engraved wings. My mother had used it every afternoon, even when creditors waited below. She said the act of measuring leaves forced a person to slow down long enough to think. I had not made tea from it since her funeral. The lid resisted, then gave with a small metallic snap. Loose leaves shifted inside. Beneath them lay the ordinary copper bottom. I pressed the scratch near the hinge with my thumbnail. A narrow plate sprang upward. The key beneath it was black iron, no longer than the width of my palm. A faded green thread had been tied through its ring. Beside it rested a strip of paper folded so tightly the edges had nearly sealed together. My mother's handwriting appeared inside. "Harland keeps what the Vale name cannot protect." There was no greeting, no signature. She had never needed either. A knock sounded. I covered the key with my hand. "Beatrice." "Elias." I should have told him to leave. Instead, I opened the door enough to see him standing in the corridor with rain still drying on his coat. "Your father has invited the county to dinner tomorrow. He enjoys witnesses. He has also sent a messenger to the bank." My fingers tightened around the door. "How do you know?" "I saw the rider leave with a Vale packet." "That does not answer the question." "No," he said. "It does not." He made no attempt to enter. The omission unsettled me more than insistence would have. "What do you want?" "To know whether anything in this house changed after we returned." Behind me, the copper plate slipped from the desk and struck the floor. Elias's attention moved past my shoulder. I opened the door. He picked up the plate but did not touch the caddy. When I showed him the paper, he read the sentence once. "Harland," he said. "You know the name. Edmund Harland was your mother's solicitor before your father replaced him." I had heard the name only in childhood, usually followed by father calling him timid. Elias turned the paper toward the window. A small mark had been pressed into one corner, almost invisible beneath the crease, a bell enclosed by a circle. "His office uses this seal on private deposits," Elias said. "How would you know?" "My brother kept documents there." The answer came too quickly to be invented, and too briefly to be complete. I set the paper beside the candle. If my mother had left evidence, father had spent years living beside it. If she had suspected him, then every quiet meal after her death had been built over something she expected me to uncover. The flame leaned toward the paper. Elias caught my wrist before the edge reached it. His grip was firm, then gone at once. "Do not destroy a message because you dislike what it may ask of you. You do not know what it asks. Neither do you. It may destroy my sisters. It may protect the families whose money disappeared." The candle hissed as wax ran down its side. I folded the paper again. "You speak as though truth arrives clean." "No. It usually arrives owing someone an apology." I placed the key inside my glove. We left through the kitchen passage before my father returned from the estate office. Elias's carriage waited beyond the yew hedge, plain enough to belong to a physician rather than a Marquess. He noticed my hesitation at the step. "You may still refuse." "If I refuse, will you go without me?" "No. The note was left for you." That answer mattered. Harland's office occupied 2 narrow rooms above a bookseller in the market town. Dust covered the brass plaque beside the stairs. A clerk with ink on both cuffs tried to turn us away until Elias gave his name. Edmund Harland emerged, carrying a ledger against his chest. He was smaller than I remembered, with white hair flattened behind his ears and spectacles that magnified his worry. When he saw the key, the ledger slipped in his hands. "Lady Vale told me you would come. My mother has been dead for 5 years." "Yes." "You waited 5 years?" His mouth folded inward. "She instructed me not to contact you while Lord Vale controlled your correspondence." "Then you knew." "I suspected. Those are often the same thing to the person who pays for your caution." He accepted the rebuke without defending himself. From a locked cabinet, he removed a gray card bearing my mother's seal. Across it were the words "Private Deposit," to be released only to Beatrice Vale, upon presentation of the iron key. Beneath the instruction, my mother had listed the contents: relief directives, bank correspondence, and disputed transfers. Harland led us to a lower room where shelves held deed boxes and sealed packets. He stopped before an empty space. My key fit the brass label beneath it. There was no box. Harland gripped the shelf. "It was here yesterday." Before releasing any private deposit, Harland's clerk was required to record the collecting carriage, driver, and stable mark in the delivery book. Elias crouched beside the lock. A pale curl of metal lay on the floor. "Opened with a tool," he said. Harland hurried upstairs and returned with the intake register. His fingers shook as it followed the latest entry. "A request arrived this morning. It claimed the deposit concerned mine liabilities and must be surrendered to Vale Bank for review." "Who signed it?" I asked. "No person. The bank seal was enough for my clerk." Elias took the register. "At what hour?" "Shortly after opening. The rider we had seen could not have reached town that early. The request had been sent before Elias asked about the relief fund, before Mrs. Mercer handed him the letter, before I found the key. Father had not reacted to our investigation. He had prepared for it." A noise rose from the street below. Wheels stopped hard against the curb. Men's voices followed. Then the bookseller shouting that the office was closed. Harland's face drained of color. Elias shut the register and placed it in my hands. "Do not give this to anyone." The stairwell door struck the wall downstairs. A familiar voice called up through the building. "Beatrice?" My father sounded neither angry nor frightened. He sounded relieved to have found me. Then another man spoke beside him. "By order of Vale Bank, no document is to leave these premises." The bank representative reached Harland's landing before my father did. "Mr." Bell wore a dark coat beaded with rain and carried a leather portfolio beneath one arm. 2 clerks followed him, both young enough to avoid meeting Elias's eyes. "By authority of Vale Bank," Bell said, "all records concerning the mine relief fund are subject to immediate review." Harland's hand remained on the banister. "This is a private legal office, and the missing money concerns a Vale account. My father appeared behind them, breathing lightly from the stairs. He had not hurried. Men like him rarely needed to. "Beatrice," he said, as though finding me there caused him pain. "Come home." I held the intake register against my ribs. Elias stepped between the clerks and the lower room. "Show me the order." Bell opened his portfolio. The paper bore the bank seal, and my father's signature as trustee of the fund. It also bore mine. The date beside my name was 3 weeks old. I had never seen it. Father watched my face. "You signed several authorizations after the roof accounts were reviewed. I signed no order allowing you to seize my mother's deposit. You may not remember." The cruelty of the sentence lay in its gentleness. He did not call me a liar. He suggested I was unreliable enough to do the work for him. Elias read the orpasu. "If Miss Vale contests the signature, nothing leaves until a magistrate examines it." Bell's jaw shifted. "The bank can suspend every payment connected to the account while she contests it." Mrs. Mercer's rent notice flashed through my mind. Father had chosen the threat precisely. I placed the register on Harlan's desk. "Keep it here." Harlan stared at me. "If anyone removes it," I added, "record the name, the hour, and every witness." My father's expression sharpened. Then he smiled. "The dinner remains tomorrow evening," he said. "Since his lordship has taken such interest in our affairs, the county deserves clarity." Elias folded the false order and returned it to Bell. Clarity is rarely what a man requests when he has already invited an audience. Father's eyes moved between us. "That sounds almost protective." The trap closed quietly. If Elias defended me, Father would call it proof that I had influenced him. If Elias stepped away, the county would treat his distance as judgment. He knew it too. On the carriage ride back, neither of us spoke until the gates of Vale House appeared. "You should leave before dinner," I said. Elias's gloved hand rested on the silver head of his walking stick. "Would you? This is not your family." "No. That is why I can still see what they are doing." I turned toward the window. "That has not stopped you from letting them do it." His answer came after the wheels crossed the bridge. "No." The single word carried more weight than a defense. At dusk the following day, carriages filled the circular drive. Father had invited the Vale banker, the estate solicitor, 2 neighboring landowners, the mine steward, Mrs. Mercer, and Reverend Cole from the Parish Relief Committee. Lydia wore blue silk, Cecily wore pearl gray, and looked ill beneath the candlelight. No one explained why a widow had been seated beside men who controlled her rent. She was not a guest. She was evidence. The copper tea caddy stood beside my plate. I had brought it down myself and kept the iron key inside the cuff of my sleeve. Elias sat across from me. Father placed Lydia at his right hand, close enough for the arrangement to resemble an announcement. The soup had not been served when 2 servants carried in a broad wooden board. A clerk's copy of the relief ledger had been pinned across it. My signature appeared beneath the missing payments. The banker adjusted his spectacles. Reverend Cole folded his hands. Mrs. Mercer stopped touching the edge of her napkin. Father rose. "Before this family discusses its future, there is an unpleasant matter we must address." He walked behind Lydia and rested one hand on her shoulder. "Beatrice has always resented her sisters. When she learned the Marquess of Blackmere intended to join our families, she manufactured a financial crisis and made herself appear to be the only person capable of rescuing us." A murmur passed around the table. Lydia lowered her eyes with practiced sorrow. Cecily gripped the stem of her water glass. Father pointed to the enlarged page. "The alteration is calculated. The missing funds created distress among the widows, distrust toward the estate, and an opportunity for my youngest daughter to present herself as indispensable." Mr. Bell cleared his throat. "The bank has confirmed that her signature appears on the transfer instructions." "On a copy," Elias said. Every face turned toward him. Father's hand remained on Lydia's shoulder. "A copied ledger, provided by the bank," Bell replied. "Then produce the original. We are locating it. So, you have confirmed ink you do not possess on a page you did not examine." A landowner near the end of the table shifted in his chair. Father watched the movement and used it. "You see how quickly his lordship answers for her." Elias's fingers tightened beside his plate. Father continued before he could respond. Beatrice accompanied him to a private solicitor. They attempted to remove documents from review. Now he questions the bank because the evidence compromises a woman with whom he has spent 2 unchaperoned afternoons. Heat rose beneath my collar. The accusation was not merely theft anymore. It was seduction. Lydia touched father's wrist. Please, this is painful enough. Her voice made my humiliation sound like something happening to her. Elias started to stand. I shook my head once. If he fought the room for me, father would turn every word into proof that I had already secured his loyalty. Elias remained seated, but the effort showed in the hard line of his mouth. Father faced me. Tell them. The apology rose as naturally as breath. I am sorry. It would have ended the pressure. It would have given the banker permission to reopen the payments under father's control. Mrs. Mercer might receive coal before the week ended. For one dangerous moment, the lie felt useful. Then Mrs. Mercer leaned toward me. Tell me plainly, did any of that money reach you? Her voice broke on the final word. I placed both palms on the table and stood. Not one coin, I said. But the false figure and my private correction create a difference my father cannot explain. Father smiled. The banker exhaled, and Reverend Cole closed his eyes. Then my father's expression faltered. I lifted the copper caddy before he could recover. The difference matches the first payment diverted into maintenance. That is where the trail begins. The table held still. My father's gaze dropped to the engraved swallow. Fear reached his face before discipline covered it. Then Lydia stood so abruptly her chair struck the floor. She is lying. The sound cracked across the dining room. Cecily whispered her name, but Lydia moved away from father and faced the witnesses. She has kept that caddy hidden since mother died. She locks her papers. She listens at doors. She has spent years waiting for a chance to punish us. Father did not stop her. He had found a new witness. Mrs. Mercer rose slowly. Her folded rent notice remained beside the untouched plate. If you can prove where it went, she said to me, why have you waited until now? There was no answer that would not wound someone. Because I was afraid. Because I obeyed him. Because part of the signature was truly mine. Mrs. Mercer's face closed before I could choose. She took the rent notice and walked out. No one asked her to stay. The public wound was not my father's accusation. It was the sound of a widow leaving the table, because my truth had arrived too late to feel different from another lie. The dining room doors had not finished closing behind Mrs. Mercer when my father reached for the wine. Let her go, he said. No one moved to stop her. The servants remained along the walls, trained into stillness. Lydia's fallen chair lay across the carpet. Cecily bent to lift it, though her hands shook so badly that the carved back knocked against the table twice. Father poured for himself. This evening has become unpleasant, he said. We will continue when Beatrice is prepared to speak honestly. I carried the copper caddy out before he could dismiss me. The nearest place with a lock was the small potting room behind the greenhouse. My mother had once used it to force roses through winter. Since her death, cracked clay pots and rusted tools had replaced the flowers. I set the caddy on a narrow bench. The lamp would not catch. I struck the match again, dragged the flame beneath the wick, and burned my thumb before the glass chimney filled with light. Only then did I notice blood on the copper lid. The iron key had cut through the lining of my sleeve and opened the skin below my wrist. A thin red line had run into my palm. I pressed my hand against my skirt. Footsteps crossed the greenhouse stones. The outer door opened, releasing a gust that stirred the dead leaves beneath the benches. Elias entered alone. You should return to your guests, I said. They are not mine. They came to see which daughter you would choose. They came to watch your father decide what I believed. He closed the door against the wind but left the latch untouched. The gesture was deliberate. I could leave without asking him to move. His gaze settled on my hand. You are bleeding. It is shallow. That is not the same as clean. He found a basin beneath the shelf, poured water from a covered jug, and tested it with 2 fingers. The water was cold enough to make his knuckles redden. I held out my hand before he could request it. He rinsed the cut without pressing harder than necessary. Soil darkened the water. A chip in the basin caught the lamplight each time his wrist moved. From his pocket, he took a folded handkerchief. I would prefer not to ruin that, I said. I own others. He wrapped the linen around my palm and tied it below the cut. The knot rested against my pulse. Neither of us released the cloth immediately. Beyond the glass, rain slid down the panes in crooked lines. His face was close enough for me to see the pale scar near his temple and the exhaustion he had hidden at dinner. I drew my hand back. You knew. His fingers closed around the loose end of the handkerchief, then fell to his side. I knew your father was moving money through maintenance accounts. Before you arrived? Yes. The answer came without decoration. I stepped around him and opened the copper caddy. The loose tea shifted beneath the false plate. You knew my name appeared in the fund. I knew a daughter of Lord Vale had signed several transfers. But you did not know which daughter? I suspected. Me. Yes. The word made the cut beneath the linen burn again. Elias rested his walking stick against the bench. My brother invested in the mine before he died. When I inherited his interests, I found payment schedules that did not match the reports sent to the relief committee. Your mother's former solicitor appeared in an old memorandum. That is why I knew Harlan's name. And the marriage visit? Your father offered access to the mine if I married into the family. A clay pot cracked beneath my shoe. I had stepped on it without noticing. So, you came to inspect his daughters and his accounts at the same time. I came to discover which mattered to him more. You could have asked me privately. I had no reason to know you would answer. You had no reason to know I was guilty either. No, the admission held no attempt to soften itself. I turned away and began stacking the broken pieces of the pot on the bench. One shard, then another. It was useless work, but it kept my hands occupied. You saw the board before dinner, I said. I saw servants carrying it through the West Passage, and you stayed. Yes. You knew what he meant to do. I knew he intended to accuse you. I did not know Lydia would join him or that Mrs. Mercer would be brought as a witness. But you stayed. His jaw tightened. I believed that if he made the accusation publicly, he would commit himself to a version we could test. I believed the witnesses would prevent him from changing it later. A bitter laugh escaped me. You believed my humiliation would be useful. Yes. The word struck harder because he refused to hide from it. He stepped closer, then stopped with the width of the bench between us. I told myself you already knew how your father treated you. I told myself one more evening would not alter the cost. It altered who paid it. I know. No. You watched Mrs. Mercer leave. You watched Lydia call me a liar. You saw my father make every kindness between us look like corruption, and you decided the evidence would be cleaner if I endured it. His hand settled on the bench. The scar across his knuckles whitened. I was wrong. You were calculated. He accepted the word without flinching. The rain intensified, drumming against the greenhouse roof. A seam above us leaked onto a tray of empty seed pots. Elias moved the tray beneath the drip. The ordinary action undid something in me more efficiently than an apology might have. He did not belong among broken pots and dead vines, yet he placed each container beneath the water, as though preventing one more mess was the only service he had the right to offer. My brother was accused of using army contracts to enrich himself, he said. Some of the accusation was false, some was not. I waited. I found a report that would have exposed him. I kept it sealed until after his death, because I feared what it would do to the title, the tenants, and everyone employed on his estates. And what did it do while sealed? It allowed the men beneath him to carry the blame. His eyes remained on the tray. I have used silence as a form of order before. I recognized your father's method, because part of it was mine. The confession did not repair the evening. It made him real enough to injure me differently. I touched the handkerchief around my palm. Why tell me now? Because asking for your trust without telling you what I have done would be another arrangement made over your head. The answer drew me toward him before judgment could stop me. He raised one hand, slowly enough that I could refuse. His fingers brushed a strand of hair caught against my cheek. The contact was brief. Still, my breath changed. His thumb hovered near my jaw. The greenhouse seemed smaller, filled with rain, damp earth, and the warmth held between us. I wanted to step closer. That was precisely why I stepped back. I will not become your evidence, Elias. His hand lowered. And you will not become my escape. Pain crossed his face, quiet and unperformed. What do you require of me? The truth before it is useful. He nodded once. And tonight? Not tonight. He collected his walking stick. At the door, he paused without turning. Your father will expect you to remain because leaving would look like guilt. I know. What do you intend to do? I placed the copper caddy beneath my uninjured arm. For years, remaining had been the proof I offered of loyalty. I no longer knew who that proof had protected. I will decide before he does. I left Vale House before dawn with one trunk, the copper caddy, and my mother's blue wool coat folded across my arm. No carriage waited. Father had dismissed the night staff and chained the stable doors, expecting departure to become difficult enough that I would reconsider. I carried the trunk down the front steps myself. The gravel cut through my shoes. By the time I reached the stone bridge, one brass buckle had torn loose, and the trunk kept striking my knee. A groom rode after me before the crossroads. "Miss Vale." He held out a folded note but would not dismount. "Return before breakfast, and this will remain a family matter." Beneath that sentence, Father had added, "The relief payments will remain suspended while you persist in challenging the trustees." I tore the note once and handed the pieces back. "Tell him I read it." Elias's carriage found me near the old toll house. He stepped down before it stopped moving, his walking stick sinking into the wet verge. "You carried that from the house?" "The trunk has not complained. I am about to." He reached for the handle. I kept my hand on it. "Where do you intend to take me?" "Blackmere House is prepared." "Not Blackmere House." The refusal stopped him. "You cannot remain on the road." "I did not say I would." "Your father has sent word that you are distressed and acting without judgment. Then arriving at your house before breakfast would serve his story beautifully." His mouth hardened. "What do you require?" "A place where my father cannot claim I was purchased, and where you cannot mistake shelter for permission." A cart approached behind us. Mrs. Mercer sat beside the driver, a basket of coal scraps at her feet. Her expression changed when she saw my trunk. "You left?" "Yes." "For him?" "No." The answer came without hesitation. Mrs. Mercer studied me for a long moment. "I do not believe you yet," she said, "but I know what it means to have a powerful man decide where a woman is allowed to sleep." Mrs. Mercer's cottage had one spare room because her eldest son had joined a merchant ship the previous spring. The roof leaked above the washstand. A crack in the window had been packed with wool. She placed a chipped cup on the table. "You can stay until the bank takes the cottage." She pushed a notice toward me. The relief fund had been frozen pending an inquiry into fraudulent administration. Without the subsidy, the estate claimed full rent and arrears from every household on the mine row. The notice allowed less than a fortnight. My signature did not appear on this one. Father's did. By midday, matching papers had been nailed to every cottage door. Men returning from the mine tore them down. The steward returned with 2 constables and replaced them. Mrs. Mercer remained inside, peeling potatoes with a blunt knife. "I cannot ask them to trust me," I said. "You should not." "What can I ask?" "Give them a reason not to close the door." That afternoon, Elias sent his solicitor, Mr. Rowan, with a written offer to cover every missed relief payment from Elias's private accounts. The sum would keep the cottages secure through winter. "Will the bank reopen the fund?" I asked. "No." "Will it establish where the missing money went?" "It will not." "Will it prevent Lord Vale from saying the Marquess paid to hide my theft?" Rowan did not answer. I returned the document. "Tell Elias I am grateful." "But you refuse." "I refuse to replace stolen money with money powerful enough to make the theft irrelevant." After he left, Mrs. Mercer dropped the knife onto the table. "You could have taken it." "Yes. My youngest needs boots. The Harrow baby has a cough." "I know. Then do not make purity another luxury we cannot afford." The words opened a clean wound. "If I accept his money, my father controls the explanation. Elias becomes the man who rescued us, and whether I stole anything stops mattering." Mrs. Mercer's fingers remained around the potato. "What are you offering instead?" "I do not know yet." "Then find out quickly." Harland came before evening, carrying a tin dispatch box and a face gray with fatigue. Inside were copies of the deposit card, the bank seizure order, and the intake register entry. He had made duplicates before the bank clerks returned. "They have filed notice to challenge your legal standing," he said. "Lord Vale claims the fund is estate property and that you removed confidential records while emotionally compromised." "What will it cost to fight?" Harland named an amount larger than anything I possessed. I went to my trunk. Beneath my mother's coat lay a velvet case. Inside was the pearl brooch she had worn at every harvest supper. Father had overlooked it because he believed Lydia owned all the jewelry worth selling. I placed it in Harland's palm. He did not close his fingers. "Your mother intended this for you. She intended the fund for them. It may not cover the entire action. It will begin it." The brooch changed hands. That was when leaving became real, not when I crossed the bridge, when the last beautiful object my mother had given me became a legal retainer against the man she had married. Elias arrived after dark. He did not enter until Mrs. Mercer invited him. He placed bread and lamp oil on the floor without comment. "Rowan said you refused." "Yes." I can place the payment under the relief committee. That would still make you the source. I can loan it to the fund pending recovery. And my father would call the loan a price. His hand tightened around his walking stick. People may lose their homes. I know. Then tell me what help you will accept. Records, witnesses, access to transactions you can lawfully obtain. Nothing that lets either of us pretend money is the same as truth. And shelter? I have shelter. His gaze moved to the cracked window. Mrs. Mercer lifted her chin. It is dry where the bed stands. Elias returned his attention to me. If this is punishment for what I did, it is not. Then what is it? I left my father because he made obedience the price of safety. I will not begin trusting you by accepting the same bargain in a kinder house. The cottage settled around us. Wind pressed against the wool packed into the glass. Elias nodded. What happens between us, if anything happens, cannot begin because you had nowhere else to go. No. Or because I paid for the right to stand beside you. No. He drew a sealed packet from inside his coat and placed it on the table. These are public shipping declarations from the mine accounts. They show coal revenue sent through a holding company your father has never disclosed. I did not reach for the packet until he stepped away. At the door, he paused. I will bring nothing tomorrow, unless you ask. After he left, Mrs. Mercer broke the seal with the potato knife. The first page listed a company registered under Lydia's future married name. The second showed payments leaving the relief fund on the same days deposits entered that company. Then hammering sounded outside. Another notice was being fixed to the cottage door. This one announced that anyone assisting me in challenging Lord Vale would lose tenancy at the end of the month. The newspaper arrived, folded around a stone. It struck Mrs. Mercer's door before breakfast and split the lower pane beside the latch. By the time I reached the threshold, 3 more copies lay in the mud along the tenant row. The headline occupied half the page. Marquess and mine heiress accused of concealing fraud. Beneath it, a sketch showed Elias standing too close behind me at Harlan's office. The artist had removed the clerks, the bank representative, and my father. What remained looked intimate. Mrs. Mercer picked glass from the floor with a damp cloth. Do not touch the paper yet, she said. There may be more stones. The article quoted an unnamed member of my family. Beatrice Vale had always been secretive. She had resented the attention given to her sisters and used access to the household books to create dependence. The Marquess of Blackmere had then interfered with the bank after forming an improper attachment to her. At the bottom appeared a signed statement from Lydia. My sister wrote that she had personally witnessed me hide account papers and threatened to ruin the family if Elias chose another bride. The statement ended with a plea for compassion. Not for me, for father. A crowd gathered outside the mine office before noon. Men who had once brought me repair estimates now lowered their voices when I passed. One woman pulled her daughter away from the road. The notices on the cottage doors remained in place. Rumor had moved faster than the rain. Harlan arrived carrying another newspaper, this one from London. He set it on Mrs. Mercer's table and opened it to an older scandal. The report concerned Elias's late brother and an army supply contract. Several merchants had been prosecuted for delivering spoiled grain. A sealed memorandum, recently released by an anonymous source, showed that Elias had known his brother approved one of the contracts. The article traced the copy to an archive maintained by a financial house affiliated with Vale Bank. Mrs. Mercer read the opening paragraph twice. You said he admitted hiding a report. He did. Did he say men went to prison while he kept it sealed? No. The word tasted like surrender. Harlan removed his spectacles and polished them on his sleeve. The timing is deliberate. Lord Vale wants any document Elias provides treated as the work of a man protecting his own name. Is the report genuine? I believe so. The cottage door opened behind us. Elias stood on the step. He had heard enough. His coat was buttoned incorrectly, and damp hair clung to his forehead. He held no walking stick. The strain of standing without it showed in the uneven set of his shoulders. Mrs. Mercer left the newspaper open. Were innocent men imprisoned? Elias entered only after she stepped aside. One was innocent of knowing the grain was spoiled, he said. The others falsified inspections. And you stayed quiet. Yes. Why? My brother was dying. Exposure would have collapsed several estates tied to the contract. I told myself delay would protect the workers. Mrs. Mercer gave a hard, humorless breath. Men with land always discover that protecting workers requires workers to suffer first. Elias accepted the sentence. I folded Lydia's statement along its center. You said the men beneath your brother carried the blame. You did not say one went to prison. No. Why? Because I was ashamed. That did not stop you from asking me for truth before it was useful. His face tightened. No. The answer should have satisfied the boundary I had demanded. Instead, it proved how easily even honest men measured confession. Elias placed a document beside the newspaper. I have resigned from the County Relief Committee and suspended my claim to any voting interest in the Vale mine until the inquiry is complete. Harland lifted the page. You will lose access to the records. I have already provided every public transaction I lawfully possess. And the marriage proposal? I asked. Mrs. Mercer's hand stopped above the broken pane. Elias met my eyes. There will be no proposal while your father can call it payment. The words hurt more than they should have. He continued before I could mistake the pain for betrayal. Not while you need my name to be believed. If I ever ask you, it will be after you can refuse me without losing shelter, money, or your place in this fight. The restraint in the promise made it harder to distrust him. It did not make trust immediate. A carriage stopped beyond the row. Father's solicitor came alone. Mr. Grant removed his hat and handed me a sealed agreement. He would not enter the cottage. The terms were simple. I would confess to altering and mismanaging the relief ledger. Father would describe the missing funds as an accounting failure rather than theft. The bank would release emergency payments, withdraw the eviction notices, and provide coal before the next cold spell. No criminal accusation would be filed against me. No action would be taken against Elias. At the bottom waited a blank line. I have ink in the carriage, Grant said. Mrs. Mercer read the agreement over my shoulder. How soon would they release the money? By tomorrow afternoon. Her youngest boy coughed in the back room. The sound answered every legal argument I possessed. Elias said nothing. That was worse than persuasion. I carried the agreement to the table. Mrs. Mercer placed an ink bottle beside it, but did not offer advice. My name fit easily beneath a confession. It had done so before. I wrote Beatrice, then stopped with the pen above the page. Outside, doors opened along the row. Families had begun carrying trunks into the lane. The mine steward had ordered the empty cottages prepared for new workers who would sign direct wage agreements and waive relief claims. Mrs. Mercer's eldest daughter dragged a blanket chest through the mud. A wooden toy horse fell from its top and broke beneath one wheel. The child knelt beside it. Something inside me reached for the familiar bargain. Take the blame. End the noise. Make the powerful man gentle again. My pen touched the paper. Elias shifted near the door but did not move toward me. He had finally understood that stopping my hand would only replace one authority with another. Mrs. Mercer returned, carrying the broken horse. She set both pieces beside the confession. If you sign, she said, my children may sleep here tomorrow. I know, and your father will own the reason we stayed. I know. What will you do? The question belonged to me. Not Elias. Not father. Not the frightened girl who had changed a figure because a mine closure had been placed on her shoulders. I drew a line through my unfinished name. Then I tore the agreement from top to bottom. Mr. Grant stepped backward. Miss Vale, consider what you are refusing. I have considered it for years. His face lost its professional calm. Your father will sell the tenant land. Elias straightened. He cannot sell occupied relief property, while ownership is disputed. He filed the sale petition this morning. The hearing is at the end of the week. Grant replaced his hat. If Miss Vale will not accept mercy, Lord Vale will protect the estate. The carriage left before the torn pages settled on the floor. Harland picked up one half of the agreement. This confession was not merely an offer, he said. It was meant to become the final proof against you. From the lane came the sound of another hammer. A red auction notice was being fixed over the eviction order on Mrs. Mercer's door. The sale would include every cottage, the schoolroom, and the ground beneath the relief chapel. Father was no longer trying to make the truth disappear. He was preparing to sell everyone who might remember it. The auction hearing was held in the parish assembly hall because the magistrate's chamber could not contain everyone who claimed an interest in the mine land. Workers filled the benches before sunrise. Widows stood along the walls. Bank clerks occupied a row near the front with their portfolios balanced on their knees. Lord Vale sat at the long table beneath the county seal, Lydia on one side and Mr. Bell on the other. My chair had been placed opposite them. Elias stood near the rear doors. He had no place at the table and made no attempt to claim one. Harland arranged our papers while Mrs. Mercer set the broken wooden horse beside my hand. "You do not need that," I whispered. "I do," she said. "It reminds me what waiting costs." The magistrate entered, and the hall rose. Father spoke first. He did not begin with money. He began with concern. "My daughter is intelligent," he said. "She is also deeply impressionable. Since her mother's death, she has confused responsibility with authority and private resentment with moral duty." He described the altered ledger, my visit to Harland, and my association with Elias. Every fact was true enough to carry the lie built around it. Then Lydia stood. Her blue dress had been chosen for grief rather than beauty. She told the magistrate I had hidden papers for years, listened outside Father's study, and threatened to ruin the family if Elias preferred her. "Did your sister ever say those words?" the magistrate asked. Lydia's fingers closed around the rail. She did not need to. A murmur moved through the workers. Father touched her sleeve, and she sat. "Mr. Bell presented the copied ledger and the seizure order bearing my name. He called the transfer instructions valid and the proposed sale necessary to protect creditors. When he finished, the magistrate turned to me. "Miss Vale, do you deny altering the relief ledger?" "No." I kept my hands flat on the table. "My mother created the fund after the first mine collapse. After she died, my father told me the estate could not meet its obligations. He ordered me to move money from the widow's column into maintenance." Father sighed. She was a grieving child. I was old enough to understand a ledger and frightened enough not to question him. The magistrate leaned forward. "Did you make the alteration willingly?" I held the pen. "I wrote the figure. That part belongs to me." Mrs. Mercer's broken horse lay between my wrists, but I did not authorize the payments that followed. I did not write the letters ending the widow's support. I did not create the holding company that received the money. Mr. Bell rose. "The company records are not proof of Lord Vale's involvement." "They are not," I said. "So let us begin with what they prove." At my request, Harland handed the magistrate the public shipping declarations Elias had obtained before resigning from the relief committee. Coal revenue had entered the holding company on the same days money left the relief account. The company had been registered under the married name Lydia would receive if Father's proposed alliance succeeded. Lydia's face lost color. "I knew nothing about it." "I believe you," I said. Father turned sharply toward me. He had expected me to attack her. That had always been one of his safer stories. Harland next produced the intake register from his office, along with the deposit card bearing my mother's seal. The record established that a private box had existed and that someone using the bank seal removed it before I found the key. Mr. Bell protested. "A seal may be copied." "Yes," I said. "Which is why the name of the person who requested the box matters. There is no name. There is a carriage entry." Harland placed the delivery book beside the register. Its entry identified the carriage, driver, and stable mark that collected the deposit. All three belonged to Father's private account. Father smiled. "My carriage is frequently used for estate business. Then you will have no objection to explaining what was collected." "I collected nothing." His voice remained polished. The magistrate asked whether we possessed the missing documents. "No," I said. Father relaxed, by the smallest degree. "But my mother left a way to identify them." I lifted the iron key. It rested on my palm, the faded green thread hanging below my fingers. Father's eyes fixed on it. My mother marked every private account with a swallow and green thread. Harland's deposit card lists the same mark. The missing packet contained the original relief instructions, her correspondence with the bank, and a list of transfers she believed required independent review. Mr. Bell stood again. "You cannot know the contents of a box you never opened." "I know what the deposit card says. It says private accounts, nothing more." A bench creaked behind Father. Cecily rose from among the witnesses. She had entered without me seeing her. In both hands, she held a gray packet tied with green ribbon. Father's chair scraped the floor. "Sit down." Cecily stopped, but she did not sit. Her voice barely reached the nearest benches. "Lydia told me to burn it." Lydia turned toward her. "I told you to remove it. You said Father would lose everything if Beatrice found it." Cecily walked to the front. Each step sounded separate from the next. She placed the packet before the magistrate. "I found it in Father's locked cabinet after the dinner. Mother's seal was broken. The papers inside were not." Father rose. "My daughter is confused." Cecily flinched. The old command still worked on her body. It no longer controlled her feet. "I saw you take the tea caddy from Mother's room after she died," she said. "You could not open the false bottom. You put it in the morning cabinet and told us never to let Beatrice have it." I had not told Cecily about the hidden plate. No one in the hall knew where the key had been concealed. I turned the iron key once between my fingers. Father pointed at the packet. "Who told you the key was inside the tea caddy?" The question left him too quickly. No one moved. His hand remained extended, but the authority had gone out of it. Mr. Bell lowered his eyes. Lydia covered her mouth. The magistrate spoke slowly. "Lord Vale." Miss Vale did not say where she found the key. Father looked towards Cecily, not at me. "You foolish girl. I told you to destroy it." Cecily stepped back as if struck. That was the sentence that ended him. Not because it proved every transfer, because it revealed the mind behind them. Father had known about the key, the packet, and the order to destroy evidence he had claimed did not exist. The magistrate opened my mother's papers. There were transfer instructions bearing Father's private mark, letters objecting to withdrawals, and a draft petition removing him as trustee. The final page traced relief money through the maintenance account and into debts held by Vale Bank. Mr. Bell began gathering his portfolio. The magistrate ordered him to stop. Father tried once more. My wife was ill. Beatrice was unstable with grief. These papers can be interpreted in many ways. I stood. Elias remained by the doors. He did not come closer. He had brought records when I asked. He had surrendered power when keeping it would have helped him. Now the story belonged to me. "I wrote the number," I said. "He wrote the story around it." Father's face tightened. "You would destroy your family for minors who will forget your name." "No." My voice carried without effort. "You survived by making me ashamed of the truth. I will not carry your shame another day." The magistrate suspended the auction, froze every Vale trust account, and removed Father from control of the relief fund pending a full inquiry. No one cheered. Mrs. Mercer closed her hand around the broken horse. The widows had not been repaid. The cottages were still cold. My mother was still dead, and my signature remained on the page that had helped Father begin. Winning the story did not erase what it had cost. It only meant he could no longer finish it for me. The first relief payments returned before the inquiry ended. They came in small envelopes from an account the magistrate placed under independent control. The amounts were enough for coal, bread, and part of the rent owed. They were not enough to restore the weeks families had spent choosing which need could wait. Mrs. Mercer opened hers at the kitchen table. She counted the notes twice, folded one beneath the cracked sugar bowl, and handed the rest to her eldest daughter. "Buy the boots first," she said. The red auction notice still hung beside the door. The sale had been suspended, not erased. 3 families had already left the tenant row. The Harrows moved to a cousin's farm after their baby's cough worsened. One cottage stood empty, with a curtain trapped outside the broken window. Winning had not called anyone back. I remained in Mrs. Mercer's spare room while Harland and the new trustees rebuilt the accounts. Each morning, I carried the copper tea caddy to the old schoolroom, where we had placed 2 desks beneath the least damaged section of roof. Widows brought letters. Miners brought wage slips, rent demands, and receipts, softened by years in pockets. I copied every claim into a new ledger. No person signed a blank page. No trustee approved a payment alone. Mrs. Mercer insisted on both rules. She also insisted my chair remain on the same side of the desk as everyone else. "The last table placed you opposite us," she said. "We will not begin there again." My father was charged with fraud, destruction of evidence, and misuse of trust property. He remained at Vale House while the court determined which rooms, fields, and accounts belonged to creditors. The newspapers stopped calling him concerned. They began calling him disgraced. I found neither word satisfying. Concern had concealed him. Disgrace made him sound like a fallen monument, rather than a man who had made choices and expected others to pay. Lydia withdrew her statement. She did not apologize. She wrote that Father had promised the holding company would become her marriage settlement. She had believed him, she said, because belief offered the only future she had been taught to recognize. I placed the letter in the copper caddy. Understanding was not forgiveness. It was only the refusal to simplify her into the role she had accepted for me. Cecily came to the schoolroom near the end of winter. She asked whether she could help copy the widow's claims. Mrs. Mercer handed her a broom. You can begin with the plaster. Cecily swept until her hands blistered. She returned the following morning. Elias did not visit for several weeks. His resignation from the County Relief Committee became permanent. The Army contract inquiry reopened, and the merchant wrongly imprisoned received a new hearing. Elias gave evidence against his brother's estate and surrendered the income attached to the disputed contracts. Several families who had dined at Blackmere stopped answering his letters. A newspaper called him weak for exposing his own name after defending it for years. He sent me the article with one sentence beneath it. "This is not punishment. It is the bill." I kept that letter outside the caddy. Spring thaw had softened the mine road when he returned to the schoolroom carrying a tray, with no servants behind him. The pot was plain pewter, but the copper caddy was mine. I had left it open beside the ledger, its false bottom removed and the iron key visible. Elias set the tray down. I was told the trustees require tea before approving roof repairs. Only the difficult repairs. Then I brought the strong blend. He reached for the pot. I moved to take it from him. He kept one hand on the handle. "You have poured enough." The words were gentle, but I did not release the pot. Neither did he. For a moment, the old drawing room returned. Father beside the fire, and my place assigned behind a service tray. Then Elias let go. The choice mattered more than the offer. I poured for Mrs. Mercer, Cecily, Harland, and myself. Elias carried each cup to the desks. When everyone had gone, he washed the cups in a basin near the stove. "You do not have to do that," I said. "I know." The reply made me smile. He dried the last cup. "The hearing concerning my brother's contracts will continue through summer." I heard. "I may lose Blackmere's remaining interest in the mine. That may be just." "Yes." He did not ask me to soften the answer. Outside, children crossed the yard carrying pieces of slate for the school roof. Elias stood beside the open window. "I do not know what remains between us," he said. "Neither do I. I know what I would like." "That is not the same thing." "No." He folded his gloves on the sill. "I would like to court you when my presence no longer changes whether people believe you. They may always say it does. Then when you no longer need to care. That may take longer. I have learned something about waiting after the truth. You also used waiting as concealment." "Yes." There was no promise that he would never fail me again. I would not have trusted one. There was only a man paying the cost of truth before asking what it might purchase. "You may walk with me on Sunday," I said. His expression changed slowly. "Is that permission?" "It is a walk. I will try to survive the uncertainty. Bring your stick. The hill remains uneven." He laughed, quiet and surprised. He did not touch me until I offered my hand. Even then, his fingers closed carefully around mine, as if consent were not a gate crossed once, but a path that had to remain open. By summer, the relief fund had repaid part of what it owed. The cottages received new roofs, though 2 stood empty. The school reopened with fewer children. Mrs. Mercer repaired the broken wooden horse, leaving the crack visible. She placed it on the trustees' desks. "So no one calls this whole," she said. My father never confessed. At his final hearing, he claimed every harsh decision had protected people too ungrateful to understand him. I did not answer. The court no longer required my silence to become his agreement. Months later, I moved into 2 rented rooms above Harland's office. The copper caddy sat beside the new relief ledger. Elias visited on Thursday evenings. Sometimes he brought records, sometimes bread, sometimes nothing that needed to be useful. On the first cold night of autumn, he found me asleep over the accounts. A cup of untouched tea had gone dark beside my hand. He covered the ledger, moved the candle away, and filled the kettle. When I woke, he was setting 2 cups on the desk, one before himself, one before me. "You do not have to stand tonight," he said. The words returned me to the table, where everything had begun. But there was no father at the fire, no sister waiting to be chosen, no audience deciding what my silence meant. I remained seated. Elias poured the tea, and this time, the story did not begin with the woman serving. It began with someone asking whether she wished to stay.